All right, so now we're going to be making a pegboard or a push pin board or a cork board. These have a lot of different names. It really just kind of depends on your regionality or personal preference on what they're called. But basically, you're looking at something with a wooden frame, which we're just going to use the square for that. We're going to go into our colors, and I'm going to start off with yellow. Then I'm going to manipulate the yellow to be kind of a sandy, woodsy color. And this you're just going to kind of have to feel on what color feels right for you. And if you don't like what you're seeing, manipulate the color one way or another until you get something that feels like a good woodsy color. And that's pretty woodsy. I think I like that. And then we're going to copy that, make it a little bit smaller, center it again. And now we're looking for something that looks kind of like a cork board. And yet again, same process. We're going to use a custom color, and we're looking for that kind of sandy, kind of like that. And that gives us our basic little cork board. Now, what I would recommend is, if in your region of wherever you're at, if cork or wood is darker or lighter, look at a live example, or for wherever you're going to be making this project for. Let's say you're in California, but you're going to be making this for somebody in New York. I don't know if there'd be enough of a difference between woods and cork and materials and everything else, but you might just want to look up and get an idea of what they see through their eyes if you're going to be making it for somebody who's not where you're at. Obviously, if you're making it for somebody who, it's where you're at, pick tones of colors that make sense for the materials that the real life object would be made out of. And we're going to go ahead and group these two guys together just right now for ease of use. And we're going to shove him off to the side. Now on any cork board, you are going to find objects. So we are going to build some of those objects. We're going to start off with a note. And here's our basic note. And we're going to build two different types of notes. We're going to build one that has some writing on it, and we're going to build one that has kind of like some squiggles or some doodles on it. So writing is basically just gray bars. So we're going to leave a little relief at the top. We're going to make it a little transparent, maybe about 75%. Maybe 70. Just going to copy. And this doesn't need to be perfect. Remember, this is a note. And notes aren't written perfectly. They're written, quickly, scribbly. And there we go. There's our first note. So we're going to copy that. We're going to group it all. We're going to squunch it down and just leave it off to the side for right now. We are going to repeat this process again. But this time we're going to make it look like a doodle. So we're going to take our little donut shape. We're going to turn him gray. We're going to put him right here. And then we're going to get a line. Yet again, turn him gray. And we're going to build something that looks reminiscent of, say, like an organizational chart or a flow chart. You could build whatever doodle you like. If you want to turn this into a stick man or something like that, no one's going to judge you. This is meant to be your project. Just if you are building this for a client, try and keep in mind something that would fit the client's wants. And remember, this is probably the only place where you can really be sloppy with your work, and it needs to be sloppy to look good. Now you can play with the transparency on this. I usually find on the ones that are the drawings, I end up starting off with gray and matching the writing and then going, I don't like that. And I usually end up going to something darker that looks more pen-esque. Just because in my mind, whenever I do a doodle or a flow graph or whatever, giving a better name than a doodle, I'm usually using a pen. And then we can play with it. We can squinch it down, see how it looks. And if it's too strong, then obviously we can come back and we can tinker with it. That's actually kind of looking good. I like it with the gunmetal at 70%. I think that gives a really good feel. Also, it helps set it apart from our written note. group, and we're going to shrink down. And these don't have to be the exact same size, but just for ease right now, I'm going to make them as close as I can. What else would you find on your corkboard? Maybe some type of photo. So we're going to do a photo real quick, and I'm going to try and stay out of my storage area for right now. And we're going to change this to kind of a gray, but I'm going to end up making it a white here in a minute. And we're going to have this photo be something really simple. This little circle, and we're going to make that circle yellow. And let's come over here to shapes, and let's find some things that might look kind of scenery-esque. So here we have a triangle, and we're going to make this triangle a dark green, kind of like that. And we're just going to kind of stack these triangles up. And yet again, this does not need to be anywhere remotely near perfect, because by the time we get this done, it's going to be so small on our illustration, it's not going to matter a whole lot. Let's go back to that woodsy color. We're going to throw him in the back. And then we have a tree. And we're going to group him. Kind of squinch him up. And we're just going to kind of place a bunch of these around and make it look like whoever is looking at this corkboard is seeing something reminiscent of maybe a family trip or a pretty motivational photo or some type of other picture that has meaning to the person who would have this corkboard in their office or at their desk or whatever. And we're just kind of making our little forest here. And you can make this nice and tidy where all the trees can be picked apart, and seen individually, or you can kind of do what I'm doing here and make it a little messy. A lot of that just kind of boils down to your personal style. If you prefer the messier look, go with the messier look. If you prefer something kind of neat and tidy, then go neat and tidy. Obviously, if you're doing this for a client, you're going to need to fit what the client wants. Excuse me. And we're going to give ourselves some land across the bottom. And just kind of match that up to the bottom of the photo. And we are going to go back with that kind of brown and push it backwards. That's a little too brown. So what I want to do is I want to do a green, but I want to do a different green. I want it to be darker, but not the exact same darkness. And then obviously we need to stretch it up to cover all the trees. Our sun's a little high. Maybe not. Maybe don't want it perfectly aligned. And let's build something that looks reminiscent of a mountain in the background. And we're going to make our mountain brown. And then we will drop the opacity down pretty significantly. And we'll do 2 of these. We'll make them different sizes. That way, wherever they're at, it looks like they're in somewhere that's pretty grand. I'm going to take him all the way back until I lose him, and then bring him back. Same thing here. And there we go. We have our photo. And I'm going to go ahead and group this all together if it will let me. I don't know if it will. One of the problems you run into is when you have a ton of objects on here, it's not going to let you group things. That's not the end of the world. You just have to be conscious of, if I can't group everything together, whenever I move it, I need to make sure to highlight everything and move it. So on something like this, you would want to move it absolutely last whenever you're building your final project. Another thing that can cause it not to want to group is if you have items within the thing you're trying to group that are already grouped, it may not let you group. So we're going to ungroup all these trees, which is a little tedious. But, if you can group it all together and make it easy for you whenever you're doing placement later, it'll be worth it. Let's see, do we get them? And we'll us group? It'll let us group now. Awesome. So since I know I can group this now, I'm going to play with it a little bit more. And I think something that will look really neat in this photo is a cloud. So I'm going to squunch this all the way down. Way down. And clouds are kind of an off-white. So what I'm going to be looking for is like the faintest bit of gray. And this is a really tough color to create, because you need something that will stand out, but you don't want something that's going to look off. Because it's kind of like almost like in between an eggshell and an off-white is what you're going for. And then once we kind of sort of have that, we're just going to copy and make a bunch of little circles. We're just going to arrange these circles into something cloud-esque. And this is where you can really use your creativity. There isn't a defined form for a cloud. You know, it's not somewhere in a book that this is a cloud, this is only a cloud. So if you want to come in here and make whatever your heart desires, you can make whatever your heart desires. And there we go. Now, before we group this, we're going to turn our rectangle white, and we're going to group it all together. And now we have our photo. And you can see that if we shrink it down and throw it on our pegboard, it looks about right. Now, the one thing I can say is I've never in my life seen a stark white sky. So we're going to ungroup this. We're going to go back to our rectangle. And we are going to look for something that is going to kind of have not the same level of off-white as our cloud, but kind of more in that realm. Maybe something a little dusky. I like that little bit of blue in there. That looks really cool. All right, so I'm pretty much in love with that. I don't think that's anything we can make any better in the amount of time that we're going to spend on it. Obviously, if you wanted to go hyper detailed and, you know, put some odd shapes in there that represented, you know, a fallen log or a rock, or you know, if you wanted to blow it up real big and try and accomplish making a bear or a turtle, you know, you could make this as detailed as you want. But do keep in mind, you know, small thin lines, the farther you are away from, you know, the distance between your subject and your art, a lot of things are just going to get lost, you know, because the detail is not going to be definable by the individual. Also, keeping in mind workflows, you know, if you spend a ton of time making a hyper detailed, you know, teeny tiny thing that's maybe only 3% of the image, that's a lot of time invested in something that isn't, you know, the main focus of the image. So just keep all that in your brain. You know, if you're trying to make some type of, you know, high art version of flat design and you want all those teeny tiny details, you know, go nuts. But if you're just trying to make something commercial or something for social media, do keep in mind at some point there is a diminishing return for more work added into some of the objects that we're going to be making. So we're going to throw him up here, and we're going to kind of make him the same size. There we go. Beautiful. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to be building a thumbtack. So this is going to be the base of our thumbtack, and we're going to make him red. Then this is going to be the shaft of our thumbtack. And he's going to be red, but he's going to be a darker red. So again, we're going to go into our custom colors, we're going to drop it down. We don't want anything too crazy, but we do want it a little bit darker. And what I would highly recommend that you do is build all of this on a 90-degree setup or on a straight up and down setup. That way you're not getting something that looks like this, which it just would look very bad. Or you're just barely off. You know, that would be extremely frustrating, especially if you've finished your illustration, then you're coming back and you're like, oh God, the thumbtack looks terrible. And might somebody notice it? Probably not, but this is your work, so you most likely will. Copy and paste. And there we go. That is the push part of our thumbtack. Now what I would recommend you look at doing is going and getting a thumbtack and looking at it and saying, okay, you know, how do the circles look? How does the shaft look? How does the needle look? How do I make this look as lifelike as possible? But yet again, within reason, because you are going to experience diminishing returns, because your thumbtack, once it's done and built and we shrink it down to an actual thumbtack size in comparison to the other things in our illustration, composing it correctly and making it all fit together well, it's not going to take up a ton of space. So if you're in the ballpark, call it good. Yet again, if you want to get hyper realistic, get a real life thumbtack and stare at it and ask yourself, is it a circle? Is it an ellipse? How do I make this look perfect? We're not going to worry about that right now, though. And this is going to be our needle. Now, you need to be very careful on the needle, and the reason why that is because it's sharp. No, not really. The needle is a really thin line, so if you make it too thin, it's just going to disappear. So we're going to have to artificially fatten up this line a little bit. Even if you were looking at a real one, the needle and the shaft are nowhere near the same size, but we do need to make it to where it's going to be visible. And we want to take this to a very silvery gray. And I think that's probably more lifelike. So now we have our thumbtack. Let's group them together. Let's shrink them down. And you can already kind of see if that was in the pin board, that looks pretty real. So what we're eventually going to have is we're going to have our photo. We're going to have our thumbtack. And there you go. Give it a little bit of a lean, like you actually push the pin in, and bam, you have your photo thumbtacked to your board. Now, is that perfect? No. If you wanted to make it perfect, you would zoom all the way in, come up to the image, and you can see our thumbtack is not perfectly disappearing into the image. So what you would need to do is get a square, and I should have made this square before I zoomed all the way in. And you're going to need to match the color of that background. And make some of that thumbtack disappear. And now it looks perfect. Now it actually looks like you pushed it in. And if you think it needs to be a little bit more, just kind of move it down and it's going to disappear behind that square. Now, since we're not actually constructing anything yet, do be conscious of the size of your square. You can see I messed it up right there, because it was poking out the other side. Now, we're not going to leave it built like this just because I may choose to use the thumbtack in other places, and matching this color won't be that big of a deal. But if for some reason you did want to go ahead and leave it all together, just simply back out, throw it over here, put it on there. Zoom all the way in, just kind of line this up as best you can. And there you go. Now it's all together. And then we could take this, we could ungroup everything, which is going to be a little irritating, but not the end of the world. And we could group it all together. The only thing I would caution you on in this is before you start grouping something as a finalized thing, make sure that you have a version of your thumbtack off to the side. And if you wanted to do it that way, now you have a complete group thumbtack poking into a picture there. And we're going to back all the way out again. So other things that we're going to find on any type of pin board is basically just scribbly mess. It's going to be notes. It's going to be something you ripped out of something, maybe a Chinese menu. And we're going to make the top part here red. And then we're going to come in and we are going to add some different lines to this. Whatever it may be, infographic, takeout menu, whatever. Just kind of come in, add a little bit of color, make it look like the real thing, whatever that real thing may be. Now you notice here I'm not really spending a whole lot of time lining up my little lines there. And the reason why that is because I am going to use a guide square to make all that perfect. So we're going to make him a nice bright yellow, and we're going to decide on a distance. And now all of our lines are perfect. We can get rid of him. We can zoom back out. And we could just kind of keep on going. You know, if we wanted to just to be a bunch of lines, we could do that. Or we could come in and put some type of graphic looking thing. Maybe we could even do something reminiscent of a bar graph. And there you have it. Now we have our little infographic, memo, brochure, whatever it may be. We're just going to group all that together and we're going to shrink it down. And we can combine that with our thumbtack. The last thing we're going to make that's going to be a part of our board is a piece of tape. And a piece of tape is unbelievably easy. All you need is a square, make it into a rectangle, shrink it down, change the color to a very pale off-white, make it somewhat translucent, and piece of tape. So those are all the things that are going to go on our board. So let's start constructing. And we're going to take a piece of tape and we're going to tape that on. So now technically this is taped on our board. Now, one of the things I'll caution you on, think about a real pegboard or a cork board, whatever you want to call it. You know, are things neat and tidy and beautiful, or are they somewhat messy? And in general, they're somewhat messy. You know, obviously there are those people out there who are really great at organizing, and bless them for being really great at organizing. Most people aren't. So we're just going to try and make this a little messy. Put that guy over there because I don't want to lose him. And another piece of tape. And it's okay if you let the tape come over the little graphic, because that's just going to make it look realer. I'm going to move this guy over just a little bit because I'm going to try and squeeze this giant menu thingy in here. What I would tell you on the size of your note and the size of your tape, just keep in mind that they need to be reminiscent of the real thing. And not all tape is the same size, so don't freak out if your tape's different sizes. That it's not going to make that big of a difference. And for something big like this, if you actually saw it on a cork board and it was taped up, you wouldn't just have one piece of tape. You'd have several pieces of tape. So try and make it real. And this, yet again, this is one of those times where you can be sloppy. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look like, you know, you actually sat down and, you know, thought about, well, you know, if I was going to put this here, it would need to be here to be perfect. It's okay if it's sloppy. Then I'm going to do a grouping of push pins down here at the bottom, because inevitably everybody has push pins just kind of hanging out, not doing anything. I know one of the things I'm extremely guilty of is whenever I could be using push pins, I am using tape because it's convenient. And I imagine that a lot of other people are in a similar boat to me as that. And then we're going to zoom all the way in. And then again, we're going to do our trick from last time. We need to cover all these little guys and just kind of stagger them. You know, be conscious that you're about to be shoving a bunch of squares to hide things. So don't group them super tight, but group them in a way that does make them look natural. This is a great time to talk about workflows. You've seen me recreate this square every time I zoom in. Hopefully one day I'll learn to do it before I zoom in, but yet again, being prepared, planning out your drawing is going to save you a lot of little time. You know, it's not like this is really costing me any major amount of time. I'm not really, way behind because I didn't make a square, but just something food for thought to keep in mind. And these don't have to be even either. You don't have to have all your push pins lining up the exact same way. And the reason why that is people are going to push these in at different strength levels and different depths. So if one's more than the other, that's not the end of the world. And there we go. And we're going to take all these guys, we're going to throw them over here, and we're actually going to bring them over to our storage. And they're really kind of the perfect size right now. So we're going to leave them alone. And then we can delete them here. And now we need to go through and we need to ungroup all this. That way we can regroup it all together. And bam, now we have our pin board or cork board or a peg board, whatever you want to call it. And we're just going to shove him over here in storage and we're going to save him. And you can start to see the elements coming together of what our final illustration is going to be. We're going to start to get more advanced as we go through with some of our future objects. So be prepared. I know this is very slow, but it's going to get more fun after we get the basic setup together, the basic organization together. Then we can start to be artistic. We can start to ask ourselves location and shading and all those other fun things. Anyways, I will see you guys in the next lecture.